Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. Thank you so much for joining. I think that we can start now. My name is Jason Langley, and I'm our content specialist here at Intelligent Fingerprinting. I'll be your host for today's webinar. We really appreciate all of you taking the time to join us today. Over the next 45 to 60 minutes, we'll explore how to evaluate and compare most of the common workplace drug testing methods, so that you can make informed decisions that fit your workplace, fit your environment, and in the end, fit all of your safety goals. I'm joined today by two experts in the world of workplace drug testing. Firstly, we have Giovanni Carducci, the managing director at IV Diagnostics. Giovanni will be sharing his experience with multiple different drug testing methods today and how they play out in real-world operations. We're also joined today by Doug Heath, the Vice President of Sales at Intelligent Fingerprinting. Doug will share his experience and expertise on fingerprint drug testing and how it compares to traditional methods. Together, our plan is to take you through the landscape, highlights, key considerations, and answer as many questions as we can. The goal today is to help you see which method fits your workplace best and select one that supports both your operational and safety objectives. A quick overview of our agenda today. We'll begin with the criteria employers should consider when choosing a testing method. Then Giovanni will present some of his insights surrounding key elements, features, and limitations of specific workplace drug testing methods. After that, Doug will share some information about fingerprint drug testing and discuss operational insights. And finally, at the end, we'll have a Q&A. Also, a quick bit of housekeeping before we start. This session is being recorded, and we'll share the link with you all afterwards. Also, please feel free to submit questions in the Q&A box throughout the session. We hope to address as many as possible during the segment. However, if a question comes up after the seminar, or if we don't get around to answering your questions today, we'll be sure to share our contact details with everyone and make sure that either we can reach out to you directly or you can reach out to us. With that, let's jump into the key criteria everyone should consider when choosing a workplace drug testing method. I'll begin with the concept of detection windows. Every drug testing method detects substance use over a different time frame. And that matters when you're choosing the right tool for your safety goals. Fingerprint drug testing, for example, identifies drug use within the last 16 to 24 hours. That makes it pretty ideal for assessing day of fitness of duty. On the other end of the spectrum, you have something like hair testing that can detect drug use going back up to 90 days, a much better suited method for identifying long-term patterns of use rather than recent impairment. Next criteria is turnaround time. How quickly can you get results, and how quickly can you act on them? In many workplace scenarios, speed is critical, whether you're screening employees before a shift or if you're responding to post-incident situations. When you're calculating the turnaround time, it's also really essential to calculate the entire process. Many organizations view urine testing as a process that should only take a minute or two. However, anyone that's experienced a urine test knows that there's a lot of facility prep, supervision, and additional labor that goes into that 1 or 2 minute test. For those of you who are using third-party call-out services, you may be familiar with the long wait times to get someone on site, essentially taking 2 of your staff out of their shift for a few hours. Finally, methods like hair or blood testing often require off-site lab processing that adds delays and logistical complexities. Next criteria is the collection experience. Is the process hygienic? Is it dignified? And is it easy to administer? The way a drug test is collected can shape employee perceptions and impact on operational flow. Urine testing often requires restroom access, gender specific observers, and biohazard handling, making it uncomfortable for both the employees and a little awkward for the administering staff. Respectful, hygienic experience improves employee cooperation, it reduces resistance, and overall eases the burden on your team. At the end of the day, we're dealing with human beings. People have to administer these tests and people have to take these tests. Next, let's talk about test integrity. How easy is it to cheat or manipulate the test? For employers, trust in the results is, of course, non-negotiable. Urine tests are notoriously vulnerable to tampering through dilution, substitution, or other forms of adulteration. Even with safeguards like temperature strips, many determined individuals can find ways to cheat. And at the end of the day, if you can't trust the result, the test loses all of its value. So a secure, traceable method protects your decision making and also reinforces accountability. Next, let's explore on-site usability. So can this test be used in the field? Is it portable? How much training is needed to administer the test? Not every workplace or not every work site has access to clinical facilities, or some might not even have access to private restrooms. In industries like construction, logistics, or utilities, testing often needs to happen on site, in vehicles, or across multiple locations. So on-site usability is a key factor to consider when you're trying to maintain compliance and safety across your entire workforce. Finally, let's examine operational costs and scalability. What are the real costs? We urge people to not just consider the price per test, but evaluate the total cost of ownership. So that includes time, labor, operational impact. A scalable, low-friction solution helps you protect your budget and your workforce. For those of you at the beginning of your journey as well, you have to consider the cost of not testing. So without a reliable screening process, you risk impaired performance, safety incidences, something like reputational damage, and even legal exposure. In high-risk industries, even a single oversight can carry enormous consequences. So operational efficiency is important, but so is risk mitigation. So a testing solution that's fast and scalable and trusted helps safeguard both your workforce and your bottom line. Overall, these criteria need to be in balance with your operational needs. So those are the main criteria that we believe people should be considering. Next, I'll hand it over to Giovanni to talk a little bit about his insights with different testing methods. Giovanni, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Maybe you can share my presentation. Great. So thank you, Jason, and hello, everyone. I'm Giovanni Carducci. This morning, basically a place in Italy, and on the past years, I've been working closely with laboratories, companies, and healthcare operators on the implementation and evaluation of drug testing method, particularly saliva, urine, and fingerprinting testing. Today, I'd like to share with you what we have learned in the field. We can say what works, where, and why. Please. In my opinion, there is no best method, only the most suitable one depending on the operation context. Practically, in many of the contexts that we operate in, companies, nursing homes, rehabilitation centers, mobile clinics, and community services, the choice of the method is never just a technical one. It is a matter of logistics, compliance, urgency, and user perception. That's why we need to understand not just the theory, but what happens when these methods are applied in a real-world situation. The goal is selecting the most suitable method on the operation context. Please. The detection windows, as Jason said before, it is the first part of that we have to take in consideration when we choose a method. For instance, if I would get my coffee, it's happened that my caffeine goes in my blood, and it is diffused in all my fluids, therefore saliva, sweat, and even tears. Then it is metabolized, and it is discharged by my urine, and the substance will be eventually deposited on my keratinic matrix, means hair. So therefore, it's happened that from now to the next 15 hours, I will find the substance in my saliva or sweat. In next days or weeks on my urine, and next months on my hair. In other words, if I would cut 1 centimeter of my hair from the skin, every centimeter will be 1 month of time. So I could say that Giovanni got some substance 3 months ago, according the 3 centimeter of my hair. So therefore, when it comes to saliva or sweat, it is something for recent use. Urine, I would say that is something goes on days to weeks, happening yesterday or 2 days ago, and hairs is months. Please. So if I looking for some method that would give me an immediate response or something recently with a short windows, I will go for saliva or sweat, means current impairment, or long windows will mean for some past or repeated use, urine and or hair. Please. If we go through the methods, as we said before, there is no someone that is better than the others. It depends on what is actually my needs and where I would like to go in pinpoint the moment of my test. Urine testing there is a long detection windows. It is cost effective. Actually, there are now million tests around the world that have been using for many years. Therefore, it is a very strong scientific or forensic validation. On the other side, requires supervision. Actually, by the law, I should check by a camera or visually the collection of the sample. And it is, of course, the gender concern. Risk of tampering. If you go on internet, you can find there is a plenty of urine, synthetic urine that you can buy even for few coins. And it is slower, means, of course, it is something that requires the collection, bringing the samples to somewhere else, and make it a test. So as a field note, we can say that this works best in a structured and static settings like companies or rehab centers. And of course, it's less effective when it comes to mobile or time-sensitive context. When it comes to saliva, we could say it is non-invasive, even though this is something that in the last 20 years we all have been claiming is non-invasive. But nowadays, more and more, saying to somebody to place a swab in the mouth, in my opinion, I'm observing that is something that is changing by the feeling of the people. But yeah, still we can say it is non-invasive, and it is used, of course. Difficult to tamper because it is immediate testing, and it is 100% suitable for rapid on-site screening. On the other side, it is very well suggested for who want to see something happening recently, but it's not for a long time. Therefore, is a shorter detection window. It is sensitive to eating, smoking, hygiene. If I drink something before or coffee before, would invalidate my test. And in some countries, still building the regulatory acceptance. If we focus on field notes, it is 100% effective in a pre-shift screening, and when it comes to criminal justice, it is the ones that the matrix that is used for roadside testing. And I value for simplicity and immediacy. Thanks. Please. I've been using also fingerprinting tests in the last 7 years, and we can say that it's extremely quick and hygienic because it doesn't matter use our finger. It has strongest user susceptibility. We can make the test, we can run the test even at airport or in any place. There is no any, say, dignified situation to manage. It is it's avoid sample misidentification, and it is widely adopted largely in Anglo-Saxon countries as a region. On the other side, is still limited validation on a broader regulatory framework. There is some countries where there is still under validation for under legislation point of view, and therefore this lower adoption outside the pilot programs. We can say that is successfully used for pilot project in already poor place. Imagine that it is eventually it's just a matter to use our hands, our fingers, and demonstrate practical advantage in speed, compliance, and user experience. Please. So, in my opinion, the new trends in the workplace I've observed in the last years more and more a shift from punitive to preventive and well-being focused. As Jason said before, never forget that eventually we are talking about human being. We are human, and I'm really observing this different way also to approach the matter. There is a growing of demand for fast, non-invasive methods. More and more, there is an integration with digital HR and compliance systems. Most of the time, in the past years, there were only big companies that were they could afford or were really implementing drug abuse workplace testing inside the organization. More and more SME companies are increasing, adopting this kind of structured programs, and the regulatory framework is still uneven. Please. But what is really still happening, it is quite funny to say, that is I use the claim that the different we are workplace testing, different rules, but same unions. If we make an example of what is happening within the European Union, it is funny to say that different countries, same union, or say same European Union, but different, sometimes different rules. No single EU-wide framework. Something that I can do in France, I can't do in Italy, or vice versa. Something that I could do in Germany, it is not allowed in other countries. There are different legislation or different way to act when it is who can request the test, whether it is an employer or occupational doctor or the authorities, which substances are mandated. I make you an example. Even within Italy, it is one country with 20 different regions. There are some regions where 7 drugs panel, others where 8 drugs panel. In some region there is the buprenorphine included. In some other there is only benzodiazepine, where the true anxiolytic drugs. And it differed. It also the different regulation differ by employees' rights. So, example, France is highly regulated. strictly protocol. Italy, it is it is managed by what we call medico competente, means occupational health, occupational doctor. It is 100% specializing only in occupational matter. Or, for instance, in UK, it is employer-driven, more flexible. So, in other words, one of the first point to check country by country is the local regulation. Strange to say that the workplace testing is 100% regulated, driven by the internal regulation, rather than the kind of test I can use. Please. So, despite I would like to go to see whether I would like to check somebody for what he did in the past, or whether it is under the effect of something, despite every method has its strengths or weakness, we cannot not to take in consideration that what I can do in Denmark, maybe I can't do in Spain, or vice versa. So on the top on this, there is the local regulation. By the way, if I could choose what I wish, that something that the best is fitting for my organization, we now know which kind of method makes you a test, give you a test for something happening now, before, or weeks ago, or months ago. So in other words, choose method based on operation context, not habits. Regulation, how my organization works, but not about my habits or habits of the people. Please. If we would say some recommendation, really, as we said before, very important slide, map the context, the workforce, environment, risks, align with the national regulation, and balance speed, acceptance, the detection needs. I could it totally change whether I'm in the middle of the ocean with a platform for oil, or I am in a company structured in a middle of a city. If I am somewhere else in a remote place, maybe I need something on site with a very well connected with a headquarter, and I do not have the possibility to collect the sample and go back. Therefore, I need something on site, or vice versa. Maybe I have a situation where I have a company well structured where I can collect employees' samples and then bring to the laboratory and make my batch-to-batch testing. Integrate, therefore, into the workflow HR involved, occupational health, compliance, and always communicate clearly, build trust with employees. It's not something we are going to see in order to punish somebody, but we are going to do something in order to have a better working environment. Please. So, final wrap-up, as a conclusion, I would say that there is no universal best method. I can make you an example. In Fiumicino International Airport, they're using fingerprinting for the body packers contrast, because they can make the test to anybody, even with the tie, and so there is no any, say, privacy issue. Urine is a really large used, and it's been used for many years. Saliva is fast. Fingerprinting is user-friendly, innovative. Hair, no way that is the primary method for seeing whether a person got drugs even months before. So as a conclusion, to me, say that it's very important to understand and to analyze which is my environment and what I would like to get from my test. And saliva or sweat for something happening recently, urine weeks, and hair months ago. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Giovanni. Next, we can throw it to Doug. Doug, you'll Doug will be talking about fingerprint drug testing and how it compares to some of the other methods that Giovanni was just speaking on.
Thank you, Jason, and thanks for the introduction, and thank you, Giovanni, for the information you've just shared. It's really insightful. So I'm going to dive into a bit of further information with more of us being more specific around fingerprint and its applications in the workplace. Sure. Thank you. So as Giovanni discussed, all any drug test is going to tell you is somebody's consumed a substance within a specific time frame. So hair being the longest, and mine potentially being a bit too long at the moment, all the way down to blood being the shortest. Now, what do we learn from a detection window? I often think of urine as the attic of a house, where we keep, everything that we've had for some time, and that detection window working that way, where we're looking back into the past. Saliva, slightly shorter. And in the same analogy, I would think as fingerprint as the kitchen table. And if we think of the kitchen table in our house, that's a real indication of what's going on in our lives now. So we're learning something with that short window. So, 16 to 24 hours, has somebody consumed recently? And then when we think of the workplace environment, it's not a 24/7 environment where people live and breathe and remain on the premises. What are we really trying to monitor and achieve with our drug testing policies and the detection window of our chosen method? Now, when we have that short detection window, we have that greater suggestion of impairment, and therefore the ability to see whether people are fit for duty on that given day, as opposed to monitoring their lifestyle. So that's going to help us to, monitor immediate risk and support those working environments. And we're focusing on that safety of today as opposed to historic drug use. Now, that isn't a condolence of drug use. We know drug use is on the rise, and it's a real situation that we have to tackle. However, even amongst drug users, I would argue they have an appetite for a safe workplace. If we think of a breathalyzer that has, it's monitoring that recent impairment, I'd like to think that's very similar to a fingerprint test. If a breathalyzer worked like a urine test, where it looked back over a week or so, and I was pulled over and breathalyzed, I'm sorry, Mr. Heath, you've had some whiskey in the past week. That doesn't tell you whether or not to take my keys off me. Whereas if it's, I'm sorry, you've had some whiskey in the last 16 hours, it's certainly telling you that I'm not safe there and then. So what we're doing is we're protecting the innocent majority whilst driving the safer behaviours and that safer workforce without monitoring anybody's lifestyle. Thank you, Jason. The collection experience. Now, bringing any testing method in-house, or albeit delivering it through a third party, as Jason sort of pointed out at the start of this webinar, managing the process and the people involved is really important. We're dealing with human beings, and these tests have, serious ramifications involved with them. I happily demonstrate fingerprint tests in front of people on most days. I'm less enthusiastic about doing that with urine samples for obvious reasons. So the fingerprint test is quick and dignified. It can be carried out at any place at any time. And it's simply a matter of displaying your fingers to the person that's collecting the sample and then placing it on a cartridge. So it's an immediate collection because time is inherently important in any workplace, allowing people to do the jobs they're there to do, as well as allowing the collectors to get back to what they need to do. Because this is often a secondary function for somebody in the workplace and not their main role. And that employee experience is obviously much, much more pleasant than it is with differing matrices where, we're collecting samples from mouths, we're having to observe people to go to the bathroom. And if we think of a busy work site where if we're having to administer nil by mouth, certain people will be lighting cigarettes, having cups of tea, coffee, drinks, something to eat, or bathrooms where there's obviously not a plentiful supply in some workplaces, having to take those facilities away from site. It lengthens the process, increases downtime, and ends up not being very dignified and pleasant, unlike with fingerprint testing. Tamper resistance, as Giovanni mentioned in his very informative section a minute ago, is really important. We need to ensure that the sample collected is the sample analysed, and it becomes difficult with other methods. Anybody can witness anybody provide a fingerprint. There's no gender issues there or anything like that, no religious issues over displaying certain body parts to people and things like that. So, you know, that sample integrity becomes inherently strong because you're witnessing it in front of your own eyes. I can demonstrate providing a fingerprint test, and I'm sat here in Sydney, Australia, and I know we have people from all around the globe attending this webinar today, and each and every one of you could ensure that I was doing it correctly from potentially thousands of miles away. So it becomes really, really strong in its integrity. We also have a tamper sort of self-locking cartridge to ensure that once that sample has been provided, and that's both lab confirmation and initial screening, that it then can't be messed with even after that point. So it remains strong through the collection experience and post-collection as well. Alongside that, all our samples are analysed within a reader, which helps us maintain a strong chain of custody with it interpreting the results for us, and also not allowing us to make mistakes in the testing process. And that goes from not using out-of-date cartridges, not analysing the same cartridge multiple times, and also ensuring traceability by logging that donor ID in it. So it's almost impossible to cheat because it's carried out in front of people with no excuses, and then that sample's maintained and kept very safe once it's given. Thank you, Jason. Turnaround time. Now, the majority of the methods that we've discussed on this webinar today will provide an instant result, with the exception of hair and blood. The time that takes is really important to analyse, and I really think the key to this isn't thinking of, once I've given my sample, how long do I have to wait for a result to appear? You know, be it a line on a urine cup or a saliva cup, or a display on the reader that we use in our drug screening process. What we really need to think about here is before the collection starts to the result begins. So are we doing nil by mouth? If so, how long for? Does this particular individual we're gathering the sample from need to go to the bathroom? How long do we need to wait for that? And are the facilities available? Now, with fingerprint testing, the collection is always immediate. The collection takes less than a minute, and the maximum time you're going to have to wait for the analysis of that sample is a total of 10 minutes. You can run these samples in a batch, so we can have our first cartridge analysing, our second, third, fourth, so on cartridges waiting to go into the reader, and we can analyse up to 6 people in 15 minutes. So I recently travelled to a remote location with multiple readers, and we tested over 150 people in less than an hour and 20 minutes. Now, I personally believe that sort of speed, that efficiency, and therefore that lack of downtime for organisations is simply impossible on other testing methods, which is a real sort of shining light when it comes to intelligent fingerprinting and the testing that we do. And of course, we then need to think about the cost of that time, because, you know, I demonstrate drug tests for a living, so I'm a rare exception and one of the only people sort of worldwide, I would imagine, that gets paid to be drug tested. You know, everybody else in the workplace is having it done to ensure their safety, and they should be doing something else that they're being paid for. So you know, anything that adds that speed, adds that efficiency, is hugely important to each and every organization. The on-site usability, and I think this is really key as well. So, you know, how practical, and as Giovanni mentioned, you know, not all organizations have to stick with one way of doing things. There's context to the decision that you make with each and every drug testing method that you choose. And, you know, no good toolbox only has a screwdriver in it. But what is, you know, the usability of that system? Does my site have the facilities available for urine testing? Do I have the staff to observe nil by mouth? All these different things, you know, where am I going to be conducting these tests? And these questions don't really apply when it comes to fingerprint testing, because it can be carried out anywhere at any time, be it the airport case study that Giovanni mentioned, roadside drug testing that we've carried out in various regions in the globe, from busy shipyards, construction sites and offices. There's no specialist preparation that's needed to be able to successfully deliver and effectively deliver a fingerprint test. And we pair that with a reader, which we often think of as a digital testing expert that sits in the room. Now, this reader isn't a limitation, it's actually a benefit to the testing process for its various sort of steps that it does it, and it requires no external power. So it's up to 8 hours of charging, 8 hours of power and continuous testing should you wish to do so from a full charge. We provide all of this in a neatly packed hard carry case, which keeps everything safe and allows you to transport your testing equipment effectively from site to site. The operational costs and scalability, and I'm going to draw back to a point that I made earlier on, and it's looking at the process holistically as opposed to individual unit cost. Now, on an individual unit cost basis, I think that fingerprint testing is incredibly competitively priced anyway, and certainly competes with the other systems out there. But when we look at the cost of testing, the time of testing, the people needed to deliver it, the downtime, all of these different things that we've already sort of mentioned, the operational costs of and the scalability of fingerprint testing really sort of come into their own, and there's no sort of downside to it. All the time we save, that old adage of time is money, you know, no wasting time, special facilities or preparations, being able to conduct these tests faster in a simpler way, in a non-invasive way, with no delays from shy bladders or nil by mouth. 20 minutes nil by mouth. We have 6 people tested in that time and back to the duties they should be doing. We're saving money on biohazardous waste disposal. We touch things each and every day. All a fingerprint test is a sweat test. Therefore, we don't require any specialist waste disposal, which can be costly. And the back to lab process is fully completed in-house with fingerprint testing as well, meaning we don't have to pay for call-out fees for either screening or laboratory services. By having an inherently quick, easy and simple process that we can utilize, it allows us to bring it in-house without having to task our colleagues with collecting urine or saliva. So to sort of summarize a little on what I've just sort of spoke about, the turnaround time is nigh on immediate. There's results in minutes, and once we get moving, each test is analyzed in 30 seconds, which is pretty unparalleled in the world of drug screening for that time. Fitness for duty, we're getting an intelligent result. We can learn something from these results. Consuming something recently creates a higher suggestion of impairment. If we think of a post-incident scenario, whereas if I was to leave this webinar and somehow go outside and crash into your car, Giovanni, sorry to use you for an example, if you were to test me with fingerprint, you know that I've consumed a substance recently, and therefore it's highly likely that's why I've put a dent in poor Giovanni's car. However, if you test me on urine, it could be something from a week ago and have absolutely nothing to do with the incident that's just happened. So that real-time indication to, my ability to work, my safeness to work is really the intelligent part of fingerprint testing. The collection experience is quick, it's dignified, and it's non-invasive. I don't mind fingerprint testing people. I would mind collecting urine, and I'm sure that's the same for the majority of the people that are on this call. Tamper resistant, I don't see how you cheat this process when it's witnessed from start to finish. It's easy to use. Anybody can use it, and it can be used anywhere with its simple process and the reader sort of holding your hand and being that expert guide throughout the process. And with all of these benefits coming together, the speed, the simplicity, the ease of use, the dignified nature, the no biohazardous chemicals or substances being provided, it becomes incredibly cost effective. And I encourage everybody on this webinar to check out the wealth of resources on Intelligent Fingerprinting website and the case studies that support that internal return on investment, and the many, many businesses that have saved a huge amount of time and money by applying this technology.
Thank you so much, Doug and Giovanni, for all of your insights. Sorry, I was just transitioning there. We have a few questions that have come through that I'll pose to both you, Doug, and Giovanni. Wherever you guys feel like you have some insights, please feel free to speak up. The first question that we have here is, do the tests differentiate what type of drugs, or would medications show positive results too?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll jump right in, and please sort of raise your hand, Giovanni, if you have anything to add. Now, drug screening generally detects drug groups. Confirmatory analysis is here to say whether there's any sort of medication that may have caused a non-negative result. So opiates, for example, is broadly detected in exactly the same way on fingerprint, on urine, and on saliva. Generally, it's detected through a non-synthetic opiate or something that metabolizes as morphine, and prescription medications can, of course, react with that and cause a non-negative result. That's not unique to fingerprint. That's across all drug screening methods. It's a nature of the beast, if you will. Something like heroin will metabolize at an enormous rate and cause a much sort of greater peak, which each test would pick up. But there is room to cross-react with prescription substances. When we think of something such as a fingerprint with that shorter detection window, the likelihood of interfering with any sort of serious medications is much, much shorter and much, much less likely due to that shorter window and that smaller net that we're going to cast. So, any heavy medications that people have, consumed over that sort of time when they've been seriously ill, when they return to work, will have long gone by then.
Perfect. Giovanni, any additional?
No, actually, Doug said everything is fine.
Perfect. One more question. I think, Doug, you'll probably be the best to answer this. Sorry, I believe the product is a great product and could be a game changer in the US, but I was wondering when the product could be available in the United States.
Yeah, of course. So firstly, thank you for believing it's a great product. I obviously believe the same too, as I'm sure Giovanni does from his experience with it. The product is currently available in the United States and being used in the forensic only market. To be operational in workplace testing, we require FDA approval. And as a business, we're committed to getting that approval. We're undergoing the process at the moment. We're making a few sort of final tweaks in order to be able to complete that. But we as an organization feel very positive and hope for it to be available as soon as possible. And of course, we will update everyone in the US when it is, and hopefully capitalize on the large number of companies that are waiting on that approval and have a high level of interest in the system.
Perfect. Thank you. One more here. For you to get the sweat from the finger, does the subject need to be sweating a lot?
No. So if I'm sure most of us on this call or on this webinar are sat here with our phone next to us on the table. That black screen that's pointing upwards, unless you've been scrolling on it whilst I've been talking, which I couldn't blame if you have. If you're to push down on that black screen, that fingerprint you see left behind is a buildup of sweat. It doesn't have to be a hot day, a cold day. We're all going to produce, that sample that needed to be analyzed. And this system is being used widely around the world, from cold reaches in Canada and Scandinavia to slightly hotter climes in the Middle East and Australia, as an example. That sample is going to be sort of ever present. And as well as that, we're gathering a sample from each and every digit. If we're having difficulties gathering a sample from fingers, we can gather them from elsewhere on people's person. But the fingertip is the easiest place to gather that sample from.
To add on to that, another question that's come through, Doug, what if a subject touches a drug but does not ingest the drug? Will it still come out as positive?
So there is room for contamination, but it's extremely unlikely. And to delve sort of further in that, we've done studies with the various universities to determine background levels of contamination in day-to-day society, and it is absolutely everywhere. From cocaine on banknotes, cannabis residue, all these variety of things where drugs exist. They're widely spread in society due to enormous amounts of drug usage. Now, if I was to handle banknotes with cocaine on, that's not going to be a positive test. If I was to dip my finger into a bag of cocaine and then put it onto our cartridge, that would be a positive test, which is why we have sort of the confirmation process available to whittle that out. Now, we sell tens of thousands of these tests each and every month. And I think a real indication of how little contamination is an issue is the correlation between screened non-negative and confirmed positive at the laboratory. Because at the laboratory, we filter out any contamination through the laboratory collection process. And if there was a wealth of non-negative screens with no traces of drug laboratory confirmation, it would clearly be an issue. But from sort of the hundreds, if not thousands of samples that's submitted, it's not an issue we see. In fact, we have an above industry standard confirmation rate.
One more question from the audience here. Do you see any value in drug testing nails?
It's not something I personally have experience with. However, Giovanni, would you care to comment?
Yes, recently in one of the congress I attended was in Spain. Recently there was a session regarding the nails, because as we said before, when it comes to the deposit of the drugs after the urine, it will be on keratinic matrices, therefore hair and actually also nails. But when it comes to nails, we cannot actually say 1 month per centimeter, but for sure in nails there is also deposit of drugs, but we cannot say when this happened. And if we talk about to be invasive or not, thinking about nails I don't think it is so easy to manage, but anyhow, it is surely there has been talking in one of the recent congress about nails.
Perfect. Thank you, Giovanni. Another question here from the audience. It has to do with the drug screening reader. Does this reader have a built-in library for all the drugs, or special custom-made library that needs to be installed based on client request?
Yes, so the reader's there as a helping hand through the process. Now, as I'm sure everyone can imagine, a fingerprint or a collection of fingerprints is a much, much smaller sample size than that of urine or saliva. I would often suggest that we're looking for a substance in a shot glass, whereas they're looking for a substance in a swimming pool. So therefore, our test has to be incredibly sensitive to detect any substances, and we're actually looking for picograms, which is a trillionth of a gram, trace amounts of substance that we're detecting. Now, because of that and that small sample size, it's difficult for us to generate a clear line that you could see with the naked eye. So as well as all the other benefits of the reader, it comes in to interpret those test results for us and almost acts as a digital third party. Now, the reader interacts with each and every cartridge that we put in through an RFID tag, which is individual to that particular cartridge, and then it searches for peaks in the control lines that we're analysing. So the reader itself doesn't have a set library of drugs. It can be updated to accommodate a variety of cartridges, from our DSC5 workplace orientated cartridge to our DSC8 drugs rehabilitation cartridge. And that can be continuously updated through various softwares and will accommodate for future drug panels or future lateral flow testing as the company sort of evolves and grows.
Perfect. One more here. Is the reader out on market yet, or will it be released soon? I think, Doug, that's a quick one for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So this current iteration of the reader has been out for a number of years, launched during COVID, and we have upwards of 2,500 of these in circulation around the world. So it's a very innovative product, and it's a very good product, but it's not a new product to the market. It's tried, tested, and established.
Perfect. One more question here. We're writing a policy at the moment. Do you have any advice on when and how frequently we should be testing our staff?
I will allow Giovanni to chip in here because he has some fantastic expertise. But first of all, I will just kick off with the point of really sort of, rather than thinking of numbers and percentages of staff you want to test, I'd sort of push back to the individual and say, well, what is it you're trying to achieve through your drug testing policy? Now, in my opinion, Giovanni may think differently, but in my opinion, what I think a good drug testing policy aims to do isn't to catch people, isn't to, find people out or anything like that. The goal is to deter people from taking drugs in the first place. If you've caught someone, I'd say it's too late because there's been an element of risk on site. They've traveled there, so on and so forth, before you've caught them. So really, we want to deter people from doing it. So if we want to deter people from taking drugs, how do we do that? We do that by testing regularly and at, frequent intervals. Now, we didn't do that if the process is hard, if it's laborious, if it's time consuming, and if it's costly. We do that if it's easy and cost efficient. So really, what deters someone? Does 10% deter the workforce? I'd say no, because if I have 100 staff and I'm going to test 10% a year, that means my staff are going to get tested once every 10 years. That doesn't make me worried about doing something. I'll roll the dice if I'm that way inclined. So I would think more of, how do I deter them? How frequently do I deter them? How frequently do I test to deter them? And then, dial it back from that. So I want everybody to be tested a quarter and dial those numbers in to really drive that. Giovanni, do you have any sort of thoughts on frequency of testing?
In my opinion, it's not a matter of opinions. As I said before, we have to refer country by country by the country legislation. There is some country where you can make the test what we call unannounced. In some other countries, the unannounced test is not allowed. So therefore, how often to make the test could be just a theoretical exercise if we do not take in consideration what is the country legislation. In some countries, you have to inform the employer 24 hours before. In some other, there is a plan. So here, the point is not on the theoretical point of view, but always on the practical point of view when it comes to the purposes of the test or the philosophy that is behind the test, whether I will punish, so making the test in a way that I get the person as a surprise, or I make an approach where I would be with the people in increasing a wellness situation to the company. So in my experience, I've seen that we could talk for hours, which is the best way, or what would have been the best way to do and how often to do. But then in practically, even any of our opinion or our wishful thinking will not fit with a specific country. So as we said also before, if I am in the middle of an ocean with a oil platform, it will be different situation compared to being in the office for just a taxi driver. So once again, it is, in my opinion, it is always have to be fair. Whatever the company, the policy, the company would like to apply, always to be fair on top on what is the legislation allows them to do.
Perfect. Thank you both. One final question, because we're nearly out of time here. Are there any differences in the accuracy of the methods being discussed?
Testing methods when it comes to screening are broadly conform to the also, to similar levels of accuracy, be it urine, saliva, or fingerprint. I'd point people to do sort of a variety of research, but each system has its downfalls and upfalls of it, in and around 95% across all of them.
Perfect. Thank you very much. With that, I think we're nearly at the end of our time here. So thank you to everyone for your questions. Thank you, of course, to Giovanni and Doug for all of your insights today. To end our session, I think we'd just like to encourage everyone to evaluate your current drugs and alcohol policy. And we urge you to use that as a guide. And Giovanni has mentioned many times before to use your local, legislation as a guide as well. For those interested in intelligent fingerprinting and fingerprint drug testing, please feel free to contact us here. You can email us directly at info@intelligentfingerprinting.com. Once again, this webinar was recorded, and the recording of this session will be emailed to all of you very shortly. So we just wanted to say thank you once more for joining us, and we hope to see you all again very soon.